Yep, thank you.
Is the whole pattern the same?
I think so. Well, don't undo it yet until I know it works. You know, I'm superstitious. This is the isolation. No wonder we were hearing every single.
You don't have
Has it?
as its own isolation. Where's that? That isolation. Oh, on top. I see. Keep going.
Good morning, Adele.
Morning, Adele. The man of the hour. Here he is.
I know you dreamed of this moment, your name in lights.
Oh, goodness. You got some kind of put back some things. And this is a script that kind of highlights one more from one of the others that would be useful.
Yes. Also, feel free to say next slide as well.
Most of these are.
Oh, this has 2 levels of.
I didn't get that right. Remember?
Doesn't this sit in there though?
When you put it in, you put the collar over it.
Right here.
And don't forget this.
Yeah. Because this sits, like the collar is not holding it tight. There's no way for it to hold it tight. Right? It just sits. in
Right.
this. Okay.
And the holes on it. Isn't that special?
Oh, look at this the hole.
That's why they gave you an extra straw. And then you're gonna drop them.
What fun time, son.
Yeah.
How are you this morning?
Well, I'm doing fine. I missed yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Hello.
Very isolated.
Sounds great. Only problem is it's not on.
What do you mean it's not on?
That's supposed to light up.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Just make sure it's plugged in all the way. There we go.
There's a locking column.
On the bottom?
No, here.
It's the cord that's doing that.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the cable. Okay. Just let it alone. There we go. What is this for?
It locks it.
Okay, so put this underneath.
I don't know. Yeah, it goes all the way down there.
Okay. After the installation of the microphone, simply slip the security clamp around the microphone cable and position around the end of the output module beneath the mounting surface.
Oh, so it'll be right under here. I wouldn't worry about it. It's stable. It's an anti-theft feature. Let me put this away and I'll take down the mic stand. Hello, sweetie.
Hello, how are you? I'm fine. And how are you?
Missed you last night.
Well, I missed. I didn't know when it was going to be.
I kept sending out voices.
No, and I didn't get notice.
I'm
So,
sorry.
anyway,
It's fun.
yes.
Do your best. This is the isolation method for the old mic. Isolating from each other. Maybe that's why when you sleep, you can get all on the it's now a fixed recovery.
Well, I think we need to get together and put together an art showing. And now is probably the time to do it, and maybe within the next month, we can have that done. But that would be, you know, well, the walls, you know. What I was hearing was the interest in what happened last night. And I was already set to give a reading to the auction, but I didn't know when it was going to be. And I didn't get any notification. So anyway, I'm
This is great. Hey. It works. It's alive. It's a miracle. It's a Christmas miracle. Look, remember the old mic when you did this? Came out of there?
Wow, so that's refocused.
Well, I know, it's it's also isolated.
Put in. But I didn't know when.
And the closer you get to it, the louder you get.
Find out when.
But you might want to get up there and try it.
They late. But the thing is, I just painted.
So I'll have my papers here to read. Am I close enough, you think?
I can't remember.
Jake, can you hear him?
Can you?
You'll probably have to turn up the game a little bit.
Okay. Make this announcement every Sunday. Welcome to this place. Turn off your cell phones. I forgot about that.
Okay.
Moderate.
Crank it up a little bit, it'll be great.
Okay. Well,
So anyway, it's been hanging in my front room. I was hanging there, and I know what that is. I need to give that to the fellowship.
I ordered 2 Sims contained. I chatted with them over the weekend, they said that worked as data Sims. So, yep, and I'm gonna put one in a tablet.
What network does team use?
Mostly T-Mobile, which is pretty prevalent at this point.
We can look forward to doing that for
Hi, Addie.
the spring.
Addie in the bush.
Sale or.
They overflow and
She
are really
loves
strong.
her book so much. This is her favorite book right now. It is a recipe book with from the letters. It's called the alphabet. It's from coconut flour. So she's got egg for an apple. What is it? Apple crisp.
beef and bacon. Beef and bacon.
Her Uncle Bryce gives her this book when he was little. And she's not let it go for the last week. I know.
Things different, at the like a plant sale and indoor type.
I assume. No.
No.
That down this year.
After it might be back there.
Up in the garden.
I read the book, okay. What is that?
Oh, man, I was guessing bacon. Seemed to be cold.
Yes, for chocolate chips.
They're recipes.
D is delicious drumsticks.
That would be, and then you just have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna go set up the,
Chicken legs.
so I turned around.
Is have the paintings up where the water sale goes on. So they can paintings. And something.
G is for
Then
gingerbread kids. And a blue and
Are you sure?
And there's nature garage sale. Okay, so, and we can, he
I
was
got the
up
material,
in
you think I just done it
April,
over, right?
which is something beautiful by the people, and then we can say, this is going to be in May, so we could plan that well.
J is for jelly roll.
Because if it's happens, that's what you're not gonna do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
K is for
Did he get you?
called.
actually have a scene going on. How do you do? Right, totally on the norm, part of it is, right, you so, but you kind of say the two weapons, maybe, I don't know, it was just a thing, and I think that's why it's where it's out of your You never know. You know, that's right. But it's pretty vivid.
I know that goal. I know, but.
Oh, brother, I just bought some more. Yeah, what you need when you got my purse, you know, I know she did.
She's been on everything back there.
She did?
Yeah, she got Dresser, she got George Paris's wooden cut prints. I kinda wanted that.
I don't want it, I should have had the option on something.
Yes, it was, I was there.
And anyway, I decided I wanted to just go.
What are you doing right after this?
And golfers.
You know, I mean, after church. Oh. Because you can stop by my house. I'm just saying.
And the thing is,
Efficiency is not her strength.
Well, and efficiency isn't even necessary, it's just that.
until they this is such an auction. I've got one
That's why I
auction. But I didn't know
Something
and so,
So I go.
we'll have we'll have the situation with my feature in these next. And anything for and then we'll have a sale in May. And then you have the.
It's 10:31 in Topeka.
It's all like management stuff.
It is beautiful. Well, you know what Brian's about, it was so cool on this. He sends me a text.
Walter.
And says, he's been in my surroundings, so he knows everything. And he says,
Can you hear me now? No? Can I? Oh, I have to look at the mic in order to be heard. Who knew? Can you hear me now? Good. Am I okay? I hope so. Well, it's just about time. I guess we can go ahead and start. If you're ready to, we're ready to roll. Well, good morning. Welcome to Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Topeka. First day of spring. My name is Walt Racker. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm happy to see so many friendly, familiar faces. And I appreciate the gift of your time. I hope this presentation will make you glad that you got here this morning to hear that. We are running live YouTube today, so if you do not wish to be seen on camera live, then we'll bring the microphone to you if you have an announcement or a joy or concern or feedback. Otherwise, you're welcome to use this mic up here. We welcome you no matter who you are or whether you're young or old, black or white, gay or straight, whether you walked in or wheeled in or limped in, or whether you're driving down the semi in your big truck. We welcome all of you. Please remember to silence your cell phones so they don't chirp in the middle of anything that's important that's going on. and we will go ahead and proceed with our program this morning. Tricia Wagner has offered to do a meaningful chalice lighting to help us remember the people of Ukraine.
Today we light the chalice for the people of Ukraine and all others that are suffering the ravages of war. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus said, "In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons."
Thank you, Tricia. This is a moment where we take time for joys and concerns. On a personal note, I'm very happy to report that the troublesome growth we were concerned about turned out not to be cancerous. So that brings an end to a couple very frightening weeks, and I'm glad to have that behind me, so to speak. Also, forgive me again, but our grandson took first place in state wrestling championship last week. Obviously, as you might imagine, he takes after his other grandpa. The beautiful presentation you see in front of you, I texted Carolyn Peck Friday morning and asked literally, do you have a swatch of blue and yellow fabric that we could use for that? And she spent the entire day handcrafting that beautiful quilted table runner. So thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Any other joys and concerns, meals, rides, people with surgeries needing assistance? I've not heard of any new developments. We're also remembering a dear friend of ours who lost her baby this week, Myra. 6 months old. It was crib death, I think. So tomorrow's her birthday. Yes.
Many people know Vaughn, Florida.
Yes.
He died a couple days ago.
Former legislator and a longtime member here, Vaughn Flora, has died. Birthdays. Susie's turning 60. Happy birthday, 60. Any anniversaries?
Patricia Hildebrand's birthday is today.
Happy birthday, Patricia, if you're online, or if you're not. Anniversaries? In any case, thank you, everybody. We have a pretty active committee of folks that devote their time providing meals and rides and cards and phone calls, and I know from personal experience how much that means to everybody. Announcements. Last night's auction, thanks to the diligent work of Jean Ryan and almost everybody in her connected family, $5,618.41. So, excellent work there. Thank you. Other announcements. Next Sunday's program, March 27th, Bobby and David Schaeffer will lead a discussion on UU governance and how groups like the Fifth Principle Project affect us all. And bear with me, Greg Monaco will be contacting members of the Interim Minister Search Committee by email to arrange a face-to-face kickoff meeting with information regarding tasks to complete and a potential timeline for completion. So wait by your computer for news from Greg. Any other announcements? Yes, we're going to talk right now about gifts and donations, a blessing box, and Janine will talk about the pledge drive while we pass the hat.
Good morning. This is kind of off the cuff a bit, so I hope I do. But I'd like for you all to think for a moment about why UUFT is important to you. And if you would shout out things, I'll repeat them into the mic. But why is UUFT important to you? Why do you participate? Why do you support it? Community. Like-minded people. Liberal presence in Topeka. Spiritual growth. Those are kind of the big ones that I usually hear. Anything else? A place of healing. Yes. Yes. I don't know about more the specifics for all of you, but Joe and I joined when our children were being born, having a place with all of those things you just mentioned for our kids. And as we got older, or as I got older, a place of healing, a place to continue our lives, even though Joe and I were separate now. But it has become a place where I want to grow old. I am growing old. What do I mean, want to grow old? Okay, at one point it was want to, but now it's there. And growing old, people to grow old and be supportive with. And we can remember all the people that have passed before in this place. So we have a big challenge before us. What I would like to hear from you now are what are some of your dreams about this place? What do you want? Where do you want us to go? What do you want us to be? Besides those things that you just mentioned, which of course we want to keep doing. A minister. Yes. What? Grow, to grow our numbers. We know there are more of us, more like-minded people that someone mentioned out there. And we can be a place of healing, of holding for them as well as they join us. Yeah. Hope in a desperate world. Hope in a desperate world. Oh my goodness. Yes. More diversity. Yes. We have been working towards that.
Do deferred maintenance.
And do the deferred maintenance. There's been many things about this facility that have been deferred because of money. Here we go. Because of money. All of those things that we dream cost money. So we need that in order to fulfill our dreams and our vision of who we are and who we want to be. Not just who we are, but where we want to go and what we want. And one of those very specific things that we voted on recently was to hire an interim minister. A called minister is another thing. But this stuff takes money. And those of you that were here for the meeting know that we need to almost double our budget, which means doubling our pledges. Now, I'm not speaking to those. I know we have people that are operating on the very edge of their income. I'm not talking to you. We are appreciative of any of the gifts that you are able to give, whether that's service or money. I'm talking to those of you, and things change. I mean, COVID, oh my God. Things change. People have kids. Kids take more money. Then kids move out. Okay, you still got college. But many of us don't have that anymore. We did a great job of raising our kids. They are taking care of themselves, and we did it here, many of us. And so now, many of us, if you are fortunate white people, have a legacy that has been passed to you, that have this generational stuff that comes up. So some of us have more than we thought we would at this time. Many of us were not churched. We were not raised churched. Those of us that were understand tithing, how much it takes to run a community like this. It's not just a few dollars a month. It takes 1/10 of your income. And if you look at that, I hope you will all very seriously think about where you want this place to go and what our vision is together and how we're going to get there with the resources that we could all raise. I really think we have a lot more resources that have not been tapped. I know that when a stewardship chair stands before you, you kind of go, okay. Some of you turn off. Please, I hope you haven't turned off. But think very hard about what this place means to you, what you want it to mean to you in the future, what you want it to mean to this larger community. We will be doing all of this digitally. You will be getting email and social media links. If you know of someone who does not do that, please let us know so that we can help them with that. But this is our cheerleading theme for the day. Let's do this for all of us.
Thank you, Janine. And I seem to have overlooked the fact that we have opening music. I apologize for the fact that I'm not able to figure out how to do the electronic part and still satisfy our copyright requirements. So Janine has graciously agreed to sing a solo of one of our best songs in the hymn book, My Life Goes On. How can I keep from singing?
And I'm going to do it from back here. I'm not sure it's going to pick up on the mic.
Okay. You can do it.
My life goes on in endless song, above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn, that hails a new creation.
Thank you, Janine. My interest in Crete began when I took an art history course from Professor Dennis Aiken at Southwestern College in about 1965. I've revisited the subject frequently since that time, especially during my pandemic sabbatical, if you will. Like many island nations, they take great pride in their homeland. They call it Megalonesi, the Big Island, because it is the largest island in the Aegean Sea and the 5th largest in the Mediterranean. Situated between Greece, Egypt, and the Levant, it is sometimes called the tiniest continent. Today I will touch on the mythology, the turbulent history, their art and architecture, and what we can learn about what remains of their material culture. I hope when I finish you will gain some appreciation for the rich and creative culture that Crete has bestowed on us. The clearest lens for viewing the history of a people is their mythology. I'm particularly fascinated with the point where mythology and history intersect, and nowhere does this come into sharper focus than in Crete. Since legend says that Zeus was born in a cave on Mount Ida, Zeus turned himself into a bull in order to mate with Europa. We'll learn more about feminine devotion to bulls later on. This union resulted in the birth of 3 boys, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon, who all competed for the rule of the island. Minos prayed to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, for a sign that he should rule the island. Poseidon heard his prayer, and he sent Minos a beautiful white bull from the sea, with the understanding that it was to be sacrificed to him. However, Minos admired the bull so much that he couldn't bear to part with it, so he hid it away in his pasture, and he sacrificed another bull in its place. Poseidon's revenge was to send a second bull and to cause Pasiphae, Minos' wife, to fall in love with it. She was so enamored of this bull, number 3 if you're keeping count, that she persuaded Daedalus, the preeminent craftsman to the gods, to construct a special cow-shaped enclosure. Think of a small bovine Trojan horse, where she could hide and mate with this bull. This union resulted in the birth of the Minotaur, half bull, half child. She adored her offspring, but as it grew and grew, it became unruly. His ferocious appetite required him to feast on the flesh of 7 young men and 7 girls every 9 years from the city of Athens. I'll spare you the backstory to that tale. Daedalus was once again employed, this time to construct a labyrinth to imprison the monster, which again employed, this time to construct a labyrinth to imprison the monster from which he could never escape. Kind of like the maze of tables in the back room last night. After the Minotaur was locked away, Theseus was summoned to come to the rescue. So he departed for Crete from Athens to slay the Minotaur. Before he set sail, Theseus promised his father Aegeus, the king of Athens, that on his return he would rig the white sails on his ship to show that his mission was successful and that Theseus, was saved. Ariadne, the daughter of Minos and Pasiphae, was the keeper of the keys to the labyrinth. So she unlocked the gate for Theseus, gave him a ball of twine so that he could find his way out after completing his mission. The ruse was successful. Theseus killed the Minotaur. He followed the thread back to the entrance and sailed away towards Athens. Daedalus and I just learned about this. Minos was so furious at the action that he imprisoned Daedalus into a tower. So his next task was to fabricate artificial wings from the feathers of the birds that came to visit him in the tower and the wax from the candles that he was given. So he fabricated wings for himself and his son Icarus to escape from Crete. Daedalus famously cautioned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, lest the heat cause the wax to melt. Alas, the careless youngster failed to heed his father's admonition, so he fell to his death. Hence the name of the Icarian Sea. Meanwhile, Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island of Knossos, where Kazantzakis grew up, by the way, and married her sister Phaedra instead. Perhaps he was distracted by his nuptials, but Theseus forgot to change the sails on his ship from black to white. So when Aegeus saw his son's ship arriving at the harbor with black sails, he threw himself into the sea in grief. The Aegean Sea was thus named in his memory. Now, the earliest traces of human occupation of Crete date back to about 130,000 BCE, during the Paleolithic Age. About 2600 BCE, and today all my dates are before the Common Era, immigrants arrived from the west, probably from Turkey when it was known as Anatolia. The fragile island measures about 160 miles east to west and about 37 miles north to south. It lies in the southern Aegean Sea, about 100 miles south of the Greek mainland and 7 miles south of Santorini, which was then called Thera. Crete consists of about 3,200 square miles, 11 mountain ranges which are filled with caves. That may be a topic for another program, we'll see. The earliest written references to Crete is in Homer's Iliad, where he reports that Crete, of the 100 cities, contributed 90 ships to Agamemnon's fleet to rescue Helen of Troy. Helen of Sparta, actually. But their Egyptian neighbors called the inhabitants Keftiu. In the Bible they were called the Kaftor, but we don't know what they called themselves. The term Minoan was coined by Arthur Evans, a British archaeologist, after Minos, the legendary king who ruled the island according to Greek myth. St. Paul remarked in his epistle to Titus that the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Sounds like my kind of people. Although this may have been a misinterpretation of Epimenides' famous conundrum that all Cretans are liars, the fact that Epimenides himself was Crete notwithstanding. The four major archaeological sites, Knossos, Phaistos, Zakros, and Mallia, were all established about 2000 BCE. The largest was Knossos, and it yielded the richest finds of material culture, which we'll discuss further below. The entire region is geologically fragile and subject to frequent earthquakes and volcanoes, both of which wrought severe damage to the island. In about 1620, the neighboring island, the northern island of Thera, which is now called Santorini, erupted with enormous force. An estimated 15 billion tons of volcanic ash and pumice buried much of the island, leaving just a small crescent of land remaining. Tidal waves and massive widespread crop failures caused great anguish in the island. An earthquake a couple hundred years later further weakened the economy, enabling the takeover by the Mycenaean Greeks to the north. Crete was later overrun by the Romans, then the Byzantines, then the Andalusian Arabs, the Venetian Republic, the Ottoman Empire, until finally becoming part of Greece in December 1913. So the people involved in excavation, something that Tricia knows more about than I do, I'm sure. Heinrich Schliemann's well-known explorations of the 7 cities of Troy sparked worldwide interest in the new science of archaeology. In addition to the many discovering the many levels of ancient Troy, Schliemann, the wealthy German, also explored Mycenae in the Peloponnese of Greece, where he found many Cretan artifacts. Arthur Evans was a successful British archaeologist, well versed in Schliemann's work and equally familiar with the rich legacy of Greek mythology and Homeric tales. Evans began his excavation modestly in 1900, and he soon realized that this task would require a much bigger staff to assist in his dig, which would occupy him for the rest of his life. An interesting side note is that when Mary Renault studied under J.R.R. Tolkien at Oxford, one of her classmates was Arthur Evans' niece, which resulted in her lifelong fascination with the mythology of Crete. She went on to write numerous historical novels based on early Greece. The King Must Die and The Bull from the Sea are the best known. So naturally, it was the architecture of Knossos that appealed to Evans first. It was the largest and one of the earliest sites on Crete. Because of its enormous size, 1,300 rooms, and its labyrinthine architecture, Evans named its inhabitants Minoans, after the eponymous king. He dubbed the major building a palace, although it remains unclear whether the building was a royal dwelling. The name remains in the absence of a better moniker. Its rooms give evidence to being used for a wide variety of administrative functions, workshops, storage rooms, a throne room, a huge central courtroom. This great hall may have been used for their famous bull leaping events, and perhaps gathering of foreign dignitaries. Atop the parapets, one finds many representations of the enormous bull horns and the double axe. The architecture in Egypt's first city reveals numerous innovative features. Hinged doors, inverted columns, which were wider at the top than at the bottom, black and red painted, light wells, blind doorways, where it was thought the spirits came and went, but virtually no fortifications, no towers, no walls, no evidence of any kind of military activity. In the vicinity, in nearby islands, Evans also found beehive tombs, which were called tholos. Within these countless rooms, Evans uncovered a rich array of frescoed walls, enormous clay vessels, hundreds of pots bearing rich designs, finely crafted gold jewelry, countless seal stones and rings with embossed designs. While assessing the incredible beauty of the building and its treasures, it's useful to remember that the Minoan culture reached its height more than 1,000 years before the classical age of Greece that scholars are so much in love with. This complex had 3 to 4 stories, which featured numerous architectural distinctions. The large columns, multi-story light wells provided ventilation and light. Doors had hinges. Others were sliding doors. And there were warehouses with large, huge clay pots holding up to 40 gallons, called pithoi, used for storing grains and olive oil and wine. The site also featured numerous workshops, including some with existing potter's wheels. There's evidence of fresh running water and an elaborate draining system. What was absent from the complex was anything associated with warfare, defensive weaponry, or barricades. In his zeal to show the wonders of Knossos to the world, Evans actually reconstructed portions of the palace. Scholars debate the accuracy of his remodeling, but agree today that such work would not be accepted. So the interior walls of the palace are covered with elaborate frescoes, painted with colored wet plaster directly onto the walls. The images represent all aspects of life in Crete: working, making pots, harvesting, celebrating, and of course, the ubiquitous bull leaping. Frequent manifestations of the natural world appear, including wheat, grapes, olives, saffron, and lilies. Their fashion is also significant. The women wore long flounced skirts with open bodices revealing the naked breasts. The men just wore loincloths. The genders were differentiated by darker reddish hue for the men and pale, almost white skin for the women. These stunning images show their love of beauty and their exuberance for public exhibitions. Some show men boxing. Others show the celebratory processions of men and women bringing in the sheaves of grain and large jugs of wine. But the largest and best known frescoes depict bull leaping, which seems to have been their national sport. The young athletes, both men and women, would literally grasp the bull by the horns and leap in a somersault over the bull. This must have been an astonishing feat of skill and strength, since these wild bulls were descendants of the aurochs, standing more than 6 feet high at the shoulders. The best known of the statues of Minoan Crete are the snake goddesses. They were made from gold and ivory. These two figures might have represented goddesses or priestesses, we're not sure, but the symbolism of the snake, which sheds its skin annually, is thought to represent the regenerative powers of motherhood. There are also smaller groupings of figures engaged in domestic activities, women baking bread and men stomping on the grapes, for example. Of the many carvings and statuettes discovered, only a few are of male figures, and they are always much smaller than those of the women, and they are never the center and the focus of attention. Next to coins, a few of which were discovered on Minoan Crete, nothing makes it easier to date material objects than pottery. And the Cretans were master potters. There were countless pots, cups, beakers, jars of all sorts, and giant pithoi, the largest holding up to 40 gallons. They made use of the potter's wheel long before their Greek neighbors to the north. Their decorations showed distinctive patterns, and a great variety of markings and distinctive images appear all across the neighboring islands in the Aegean Sea, in the Levantine corridor, in Egypt, and especially in Mycenae, in the Greek Peloponnese. The art from this new post-palatial period reflects Crete's increased role as a maritime leader. It was even called a thalassocracy because of their leadership in the sea. Their pottery showed images of dolphins and fish and octopus during this phase. The frescoes show that both women and men adorned themselves with jewelry, but the women's was always much finer and more delicately cast. Their earrings, necklaces, and bracelets were of a quality to make the modern woman jealous. In addition to the usual images, they seemed very fond of bumblebees, and they were the first Europeans to domesticate the bee. Countless seal stones have been found. These are exquisitely hand-carved, often mounted on rings, or perhaps used for currency. They varied in size and featured many of their favorite motifs: griffins, birds, lilies, and did I say bullfighting? Bull leaping, excuse me. What is missing from the artifacts are weapons. They undoubtedly employed defensive weapons, probably on their ships, to protect themselves against pirates on the high seas, but this differs greatly from the cache of swords, shields, and spears that are associated with Mycenaean and other Greek cultures. As we've discussed, the double axe, which in Greek was called labrys, had great significance in the Minoan cultures. It appears in tiny images in the seal rings, all the way up to the giant representations in the palace architecture, but it seems to have been largely ceremonial. The other missing element from the gleanings of their material culture is any kind of written documentation. Shards of pottery with early hieroglyphs were found, similar to the Egyptian hieroglyphs. The next generation of writing, Evans called Linear A, and it also has escaped translation. The third generation of writing, Evans called Linear B, and it is clearly a predecessor to the classical Greek alphabet. Schliemann and Evans found many examples of linear B in the Mycenaean sites as well. Michael Ventris was a brilliant British architect and amateur philologist who successfully translated linear B, and he was working on linear A when he was killed in an auto accident in 1956 at the age of 35. The best known example of early Cretan writing is found on what's called the Phaistos disc from the southern archaeological site of Phaistos. It's a flat saucer-shaped disc about 6 inches in diameter. Both sides have characters in a spiral manner that could be interpreted as the world's first form of printing, since the writing was made from prefabricated stamps that were pressed into the damp clay before being fired. There are 45 different characters that printed in 241 images, only a few of which have been interpreted. The surviving shards of pottery seem to have recorded commodities, olive oil, or grain, for example. Interestingly enough, only the small jugs bear any writing. They might have been used to transport goods from the sailing ships to the warehouses, but they tell us nothing about the people, their families, their lives, their relationship, their leadership in society, or their religion. So the two most notable aspects of Cretan society were their lack of fortifications and armaments, and the important role that women played in their lives. By all indications, Crete was in the middle of a vast trading empire, sailing the Mediterranean with their fleet ships, laden with finely crafted goods. They had very few actual commodities for manufacture of goods, so much of what they needed, lapis lazuli from Egypt and obsidian from Milos, all those things were imported, and then they were transferred into artwork and sold throughout the Mediterranean. So Crete was not rich in obsidian, in minerals, but their craftsmen enabled them to fabricate lovely works of art that were the envy of courts throughout the Mediterranean world. They also had access to the most prized and expensive substance known at the time, the purple dye extracted from the murex, a tiny mollusk found near the shores of Crete. There's evidence that they even farmed these mollusks from which the dye could be extracted. Finally, the images of women are almost always shown front and center in Minoan art. They were the focus of praise and worship. Their sartorial and tonsorial features seem to have been richly praised and duplicated in their art. Perhaps this came about as a result of the powerful role women had in early Greek mythology, their love of bulls notwithstanding. Beginning with Ariadne's ingenious ruse of giving Theseus the ball of twine, and our word clue, by the way, is the Greek word for twine, spool. So Ariadne's ruse of the twine for Theseus to escape the labyrinth, to Helen of Sparta's ill-advised decision to elope with Paris, to Penelope's scheme to unravel her father's funeral shroud while keeping zealous suitors at bay, the women throughout prehistoric pre-Hellenic society were held in very high esteem. They employed cleverness in lieu of physical strength. They spun and wove fabrics. They tended the gardens and fields. They raised and fed the children. They kept the home fires burning for their men who were away, not at battle, but on trading vessels. So as you see, the themes of bull worship, earthquake, labyrinth, broken promises, and hubris resonate throughout the art and culture of Crete. As is always the case, art tends to survive longer than any other aspect of ancient culture. While we know nothing about the music, the dance, the poetry, the literature, religion, or society, It is art and architecture that remain for us to enjoy. And ancient artworks can be just as inscrutable to comprehend as today's contemporary art. So throughout its turbulent history, Crete's contribution to our shared cultural heritage belie its diminutive size. The legacy of Europe's first civilization includes Dominicos Theotokopoulos, better known as El Greco, the Spanish painter, and Nikos Kazantzakis, Crete's premier man of letters, best known for Zorba the Greek and The Last Temptation of Christ. The principal themes in the artwork of these Cretan artists reflects their cultural heritage, and I would invite you to contribute your observations of how our nation's mythology affects our artwork. Thank you. Hearing none.
I have a question for you all.
All right.
Frank, if you're not going to get up, can you use the microphone? Sure I can. Talking stick, it's called. Okay.
Yeah, Frank Taff here. Your mention of the Mount Ida brings to mind a little town down in Arkansas in the Washita Mountain, not too far from where I'm from. It was the home of the Lum and Abner John Down store, a fictional radio program back in, I guess, the 40s and 50s. What do you know about Mount Ida? I don't know whether Mount Ida, Arkansas was named after that. I doubt it was, because those folks are normally not followers of Greek mythology. Do you know anything about Mount Ida?
I know my mother grew up in Attica, Kansas, which was named with the hopes that it would display the great beauty of classical Greece. There were two Mount Idas. One was on near Turkey, or is in Turkey, near the plain of Troy. The other Mount Ida on Crete, where Zeus is allegedly born. It's obviously a different mountain. I don't know about the story, but I bet your local historical society would be able to tell you who named it and why. I also lived in a town called Mount Hope, Kansas, where they used to say there was no mount and very little hope. So, well, I appreciate you indulging me in this. It took me 2 years to do what Dennis Aiken did in about a week, but the beauty of Crete is just absolutely breathtaking and magnificent. And as I say, it's 1,000 years before the age of classical Greece that most of us associate with the beginning of Western European culture. So thank you for indulging me. What else did I have to do here today?
There's more, Frank.
More questions.
Yeah. You're trying to rush through this thing, aren't you?
I have more answers.
We're not going to let you.
Well, having grown up in western Nebraska and very close to Wyoming, I just couldn't escape the relationship between the bull and the acrobatics in western rodeos.
Yeah.
That has survived time.
Walt, there's a very fine line between mythology and history.
I know.
And you said American mythology. I mean, a glaring example would be George Washington's wooden teeth.
Yeah.
It's not true, as we found out. I mean, that's one of zillions of myths that have grown up over the years and colored by politicians and others. Mm-hmm. And history is almost all mythology.
And I like to think that because we're a fairly young culture and society, we're kind of in the process of creating our own mythology. And I hope we can do better in the future.
Anyone else? Yeah, we do have Paul Bunyan.
Yeah.
What was the name of his Oh,
Babe, the blue
Babe,
ox, the
yeah.
big blue ox. Yeah, the ox.
Where's that town in Minnesota that's got this huge statue of Paul Bunyan? It's on your way up to Unistar.
Brainerd?
Yeah.
That's a Google question we'll have to settle on. Yeah, big axe.
Anyone else?
All right, well, thank you again
Back to you.
for indulging me. Did you have any closing words? No closing words. All right, well, we'll call it good. We'll have coffee and conversation, and thanks again for being part of this community.
Call them up and say, you need to come because I don't want to have to pay money. Good job. I know. I asked for one. So I think
So,